The Alaskan wilderness, a land of breathtaking beauty and brutal, unforgiving vastness. A place where nature reigns supreme and the line between life and death is razor thin. For veteran rescue pilot Jake Carter, the jagged peaks and endless snow-covered valleys of the Alaska Triangle were both his home and his adversary. He'd seen it all: whiteouts that swallowed the sky, blizzards that froze hope, and the desperate faces of those lost to the unforgiving cold. But nothing he'd ever faced could prepare him for the call that came in on a frigid November evening. Flight 731, a small private cargo plane carrying specialized mining equipment, had vanished. No distress signal, no wreckage, just a sudden eerie silence that swallowed it whole somewhere deep in the Wrangell St. Elias National Park, a region known for its anomalous magnetic readings and unexplained disappearances. It was right in the heart of what the locals called the Alaska Triangle. Jake, a man hardened by years of battling the elements, felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in his stomach. Flight 731 wasn't just another search and rescue. The cargo, though officially listed as mining equipment, was whispered to be something far more sensitive, something that had drawn the attention of men in dark suits even before takeoff. His dispatcher, a gruff but kind old-timer named Gus, had simply said, "They want this bird found, Jake. No expense spared. Top priority." Against the backdrop of a sky bruised purple by the approaching Arctic night, Jake took off in his customized rescue helicopter, the Grizzly. The air was thick with the promise of a coming storm, the kind that could ground even the most experienced pilot. But the urgency in Gus's voice and the unspoken weight of the special cargo pushed him onward. Hours passed. The search grid stretched across miles of frozen peaks and treacherous glaciers. The instruments flickered erratically, a common occurrence in the Triangle, but tonight it felt more pronounced, more malevolent. Static crackled through his headset, punctuated by ghostly whispers that seemed to claw at the edges of his sanity. Then, just as the last sliver of twilight vanished, his sensors screamed. Not a locator beacon, not the heat signature of a downed plane, but something else entirely. A massive, perfectly circular magnetic anomaly, far too large and too powerful to be natural. It was emanating from deep within the unmapped territory of the Bagley ice field, a place so remote and dangerous it was rarely traversed. Jake, a man trusted his gut more than any instrument, felt a prickle of primal fear. This wasn't Flight 731. This was something else, something ancient and impossibly vast, buried beneath miles of ice. He knew, with chilling certainty, that he was about to discover a secret far older than any human presence on this frozen land. A secret that had claimed Flight 731 and was now waiting for him. The magnetic anomaly pulsed beneath the Bagley ice field like a hidden heartbeat, drawing Jake's helicopter deeper into the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. He bypassed standard search protocols, his gut instinct screaming that Flight 731 was merely a casualty, a moth drawn to an impossible flame. This wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about discovery. As he descended, the ground below him began to distort, not just visually from the shimmering heat haze of the anomaly, but physically. Massive chunks of ancient ice, untouched for millennia, began to visibly vibrate, shedding smaller pieces that crashed into the crevasses below. The air grew heavy, charged with an unexplainable energy that made the hairs on Jake's arms stand on end. His instruments went wild, needles jumping erratically, screens flashing with indecipherable data. Breaking through a layer of dense fog that clung to the ice, Jake gasped. Below him, nestled deep within a colossal ice cavern, was something impossible. It wasn't natural. It was a structure. Vast and geometric, a fortress carved from a material that seemed to absorb the light, making it appear as a black void against the glistening blue ice. It was immense, easily a mile across, its surface rippling with an internal green light that pulsed with the same rhythm as the magnetic anomaly. It looked like a massive, dark egg, perfectly oval, half buried in the ancient glacier. Strange, intricate patterns etched into its alien surface glowed faintly with an inner light, like circuitry running beneath impossible skin. This was no crashed ship. This was something that was placed here, or had grown here, long before humans walked this frozen land. This was the Cradle. Jake circled slowly, mesmerized by the sheer scale and impossible nature of the discovery. He tried to radio Gus, but the static was now a solid wall of noise. He was completely cut off, isolated in a world suddenly rewritten by this alien presence. As he watched, a section of the Cradle shifted. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the entire structure, and a sliver of the green light intensified, then faded. It wasn't just dormant. It was active. It was alive. A chilling realization washed over Jake. The missing Flight 731 hadn't crashed into this. It had been drawn to it. The specialized mining equipment, the special cargo, wasn't for digging for gold. It was for something to do with this. Suddenly, a new blip appeared on his radar, fast-moving and closing in. Not another civilian craft. This was military. A sleek, black, unmarked jet, moving with a speed and stealth that made it clear it wasn't there for rescue. They knew. They had always known. The Alaska Triangle wasn't just a place of anomalies. It was a carefully guarded secret. Jake had stumbled upon a hidden truth far more profound and dangerous than he could ever have imagined. He was no longer just a rescue pilot. He was an intruder, a witness to a secret the government had kept buried in ice for decades. And they were coming for him.
Adrenaline surged through Jake's veins, cold and sharp. The unmarked jet was a predator, and he was the prey. He slammed the collective down, banking the Grizzly hard into a narrow ice canyon, the rotor blades screaming in protest just feet from the glistening blue walls. The jet roared overhead, its engine a deafening rip in the Arctic silence. It didn't fire. Not yet. They weren't trying to destroy him, they were trying to herd him, to force him down. A new voice, cold and dispassionate, crackled through his headset, cutting through the static with chilling clarity. Unidentified aircraft, you are in restricted airspace. Power down your vehicle and land immediately. Failure to comply will be met with lethal force. It wasn't a warning, it was a death sentence. They couldn't let him leave. He had seen the Cradle. He knew their secret. Jake ignored the transmission, pushing his helicopter to its absolute limit, weaving through a labyrinth of ice and shadow. He knew he couldn't outrun a jet, but in the treacherous, tight confines of the glacier, he had the advantage of maneuverability. He was a whisper in the canyons, while the jet was a roar in the open sky. As he flew, he risked a glance back towards the colossal alien structure. He saw something new. Small, dark shapes, almost like shards of obsidian, were detaching from the Cradle's surface. They moved with a silent, fluid grace, not flying, but gliding through the air, leaving faint trails of green energy in their wake. They were sleek, biomechanical in appearance, with sharp angles and an unsettling insect-like intelligence. The Guardians. They weren't pursuing him. Instead, they formed a silent, protective perimeter around the Cradle, their movements coordinated, their purpose clear. They were defending their home. Jake realized with a jolt that he was caught in the middle of two powerful opposing forces, a secret human project and an ancient alien intelligence, both willing to kill to protect their secrets. For hours, the silent hunt continued. The jet made several more passes, its shadow a fleeting harbinger of death. Jake used every trick he knew, every gust of wind, every blind canyon to stay one step ahead. His fuel was running dangerously low, and the Arctic night offered no solace, only a deeper, more profound darkness. He finally found a temporary refuge, a deep ice cave hidden behind a frozen waterfall, its entrance barely wide enough for his helicopter. He powered down the grizzly, plunging the world into an immediate, deafening silence, broken only by his own ragged breathing and the frantic beating of his heart. The cold began to seep in instantly. He was stranded, miles from any known outpost, with a dying helicopter and hunted by a force with seemingly unlimited resources. As he sat in the freezing darkness, the green glow from the distant cradle cast an ethereal, pulsating light against the ice walls of his cave. He was alone, but he didn't feel like it. He felt watched, not by the military jet, but by the cradle itself. The whispers in the static returned, clearer now, coalescing in his mind, not into words, but into a feeling, a sense of ancient patience, of a long, long wait that was nearing the end. The cradle was waking up, and he was trapped in its nursery. The cold was an enemy worse than any military jet. It seeped through the helicopter's fuselage, crept under Jake's layers of clothing, and tried to steal the heat from his bones. He knew he'd only last a few hours before succumbing if he didn't find a way to get warm. But to move was to risk detection. He was pinned, caught between freezing to death and being captured by his unseen pursuers. As he sat in the icy stillness, Jake focused again on the cradle. Its green, pulsing light was the only illumination, reflecting off the walls of his ice cave and creating strange, dancing shadows. The singing he had previously dismissed as static whispers was clearer now, more potent. This wasn't radio interference, it was intentional. The cradle was singing. The melody was complex, unearthly, yet it had a mathematical precision at its core that was both calming and deeply unsettling. It seeped into his consciousness, conjuring strange, fragmented images. He saw not crystalline landscapes, but star charts unlike any he knew. He saw complex biological structures assembling themselves from atoms. He saw vast, shadowy forms moving in the depths of space. These weren't dreams. This was communication. The cradle was telling him its story. He began to understand. This was not an incubator in a biological sense. It was a seed ship, a cradle for a civilization traveling in slumber. It hadn't crashed into the glacier. It had been waiting. For millennia, it had slept beneath the ice, slowly, patiently, preparing for a moment of awakening. The birth he had assumed the government knew about was not the hatching of creatures, but the reawakening of the ship itself. The guardian creatures weren't soldiers. They were caretakers, drones maintaining the sleeping vessel. They hadn't attacked him because he posed no threat to the cradle itself. The military, however, was another matter. Suddenly, the singing intensified. One of the images in his mind became crystal clear, a detailed schematic of a small energy node on the outer surface of the cradle. He saw one of the guardians approach it, emit a pulse of energy. The node glowed, radiating warmth. It was an instruction, an invitation. Jake looked at his dwindling emergency supplies, then at the green glow in the distance. To stay here meant certain death, either from the cold or from the military. The government saw him as a threat. The cradle, it seemed, saw him as something else. Making a choice that went against every survival instinct and military training he had ever known, he climbed out of the helicopter. Leaving his weapon behind, he took only his ice axe and a coil of rope. He was going to answer the invitation. He was going to the cradle.
The trek across the ice field was a battle against the elements and his own mounting fear. The cold bit at his exposed skin, and the ever-present threat of crevasses swallowed the light beneath his feet. But the green glow of the cradle, now growing brighter and more inviting, pulled him forward like a beacon. This singing intensified, guiding his steps, a symphony in his mind that drowned out the doubts. As he neared the colossal alien structure, he saw them more clearly. The Guardians. There were dozens of them, sleek, obsidian-like forms gliding silently over the cradle's surface. They moved with an unsettling, fluid grace, their forms intricate and biomechanical, yet distinctly organic. They were silent, their movements precise, performing maintenance tasks on the cradle's glowing panels. They ignored Jake, their focus solely on their ancient charge. He found the energy node he had seen in the vision. It was a section of the cradle's outer shell, glowing faintly, its intricate patterns pulsing with warmth. Cautiously, Jake reached out a gloved hand, expecting a shock, a warning. Instead, as his fingers brushed the warm surface, the entire section of the cradle's shell shimmered, and a hidden panel slid open with a soft, organic hiss. Inside, the light was intense, a vibrant green that filled a small, circular chamber. The air was warm, humid, carrying a faint, sweet, metallic scent. This was not a control room or a military outpost. This was an antechamber, a living space. And in the center, hovering gently, was a smaller, elongated version of the main cradle, glowing with the same internal green light. It was a life support unit, a chamber designed for occupants. Before he could process the implications, a new sound resonated through the chamber. It was a single, clear, resonant tone, then another, then a chorus. The Guardians, now alerted by the opening of the panel, began to gather outside the entrance, their obsidian forms blocking the light, their silent vigilance focused on him. They weren't hostile, but their presence was overwhelming. Then, a figure emerged from deeper within the antechamber. It was tall, slender, and moved with an ethereal grace. Not a guardian, not a drone. This was an occupant. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, with faint glowing lines of green energy running beneath its surface. Its eyes were large, liquid black, holding an ancient wisdom that seemed to stretch across galaxies. It wore no clothing, its form perfectly adapted to the warm, humid environment of the cradle. It extended a long, multi-jointed hand, not in aggression, but in invitation. No words were spoken, but in Jake's mind a clear, resonating thought formed, not in English, but in pure, unadulterated understanding. Welcome. The long sleep ends. You are the first of the new world. Jake stood frozen, confronted by the sheer impossibility of the moment. He was inside an alien vessel in the presence of its living occupant, with its silent guardians observing from the shadows. The human military, the threat of capture, seemed distant, almost trivial. He had found the cradle, and it had found him. The first contact wasn't a roar of battle or a scientific exchange. It was a silent, profound welcome into a new unfolding reality. The alien's thought resonated in Jake's mind, clear and undeniable. You are the first of the new world. It wasn't a threat, but a statement of fact, a prophecy unfolding in real time. Before Jake could respond, even with a thought of his own, the alien withdrew its hand and turned slowly, gesturing deeper into the cradle, inviting him to follow. They moved through a series of warm, green-lit corridors whose walls seemed to breathe with a slow, rhythmic life. The Guardians followed silently, their presence both a comfort and profoundly unsettling. Jake realized he wasn't being led to a holding cell. He was being shown. They entered a vast, central chamber, the heart of the cradle. Here, hundreds, perhaps thousands of other aliens lay in stasis pods, similar to the one he'd seen before, their bodies bathed in the soft green light. It was a civilization in slumber, waiting to reawaken. But it wasn't this sight that shocked him to his core. In the center of the chamber, integrated into the alien architecture, was human technology. Military-grade computers, medical equipment, and life support systems were all connected to the cradle by thick bundles of cables and interfaces. And standing at one of the consoles was a team of humans in white lab coats, working with a quiet, focused intensity. They were not prisoners. They were
Collaborators. One of the scientists, an older man with tired eyes but a sharp gaze, turned as he noticed Jake. He didn't look surprised. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I am Dr. Arden. Welcome to Operation Winter Cradle." Jake stared, stunned, from the scientist to the alien who had led him here. What is this?" he managed to stammer. "This is the future," Dr. Arden replied. "The cradle arrived millennia ago. We discovered it in 1962. We couldn't destroy it, we couldn't move it, so we chose to study it, and eventually to cooperate." The alien beside Jake projected a thought once more. "We offered an exchange, knowledge for sanctuary. We sleep, they prepare the world for our awakening." Jake finally understood the terrifying truth. This wasn't a hostile conspiracy, it was a symbiosis. A secret faction of the US government had been working with these beings for decades, trading technology and knowledge for the promise of a shared future. The disappearances, the anomalies in the Alaska Triangle, they were side effects, accidents as the ship slowly reawakened, its immense energy warping space and time. The military jet hadn't been hunting him to kill him. It had been hunting him to recruit him, to bring him into the fold, as they had undoubtedly done with others who got too close. Flight 731 was carrying the last component needed to stabilize their reawakening process. Your interference has accelerated our timeline. The cradle has chosen you. It finds you compatible. Jake looked at the sleeping aliens, then at the humans working to bring about their awakening. He wasn't the first. He was just the latest. "A new world." He repeated the aliens' words, now understanding their true, terrifying meaning. It wasn't a world of conquest. It was a world of merger.
The word compatible hung in the air of the vast chamber, cold and heavy with unspoken meaning. Jake's mind, trained to see the world in black and white, friend or foe, threat or asset, struggled to process the shades of gray that now surrounded him. This wasn't an invasion, it was an integration, a merger so profound and so secret it defied all known categories of first contact. "What do you mean, compatible?" Jake asked, his voice low and steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging within him. He directed the question to Dr. Arden, but his eyes were fixed on the tall, silent alien beside him. Dr. Arden gestured towards one of the stasis pods. "Our guests, as we call them, are a symbiotic species. They have evolved over eons to merge with and enhance other life forms. Their technology, their very biology, is designed to integrate. When their cradle entered a state of partial awakening, its energy field began to scan the surrounding environment, looking for suitable partners for the final phase." The alien projected another thought, its meaning both beautiful and terrifyingly clinical. "Our bodies sleep, our consciousness prepares to join. We seek hosts who will not be broken by the union, minds strong enough to share, not shatter." The disappearances in the Alaska Triangle, Jake realized, his blood running cold. They weren't accidents, they were failed integrations. Dr. Arden nodded grimly. Yes, for decades, the cradle's awakening was unstable. The energy field was chaotic. It would pull people in, but the process was too violent, too uncontrolled. Most were simply lost. Their minds and bodies couldn't handle the strain. But you, Mr. Carter, your resilience, your unique psychological profile, your ability to navigate the chaotic energies of the triangle, you were different. The cradle didn't just notice you, it chose you. It finds your mind an ideal vessel. Jake felt a wave of violation wash over him. His entire life, his struggles, his survival instincts, they had been nothing more than an audition for a role he never asked for. He was a resource, a piece of biological hardware selected for an alien upgrade. "So what now?" Jake asked, his hand instinctively clenching into a fist. "You expect me to just accept this? To become a host for one of them?" "Acceptance is not a requirement," a new voice said. A woman stepped out from behind a computer console. She wore a severe, dark military uniform, and her eyes held the cold, pragmatic certainty of a true believer. "I am Director Fulks. I have overseen Operation Winter Cradle for 15 years. What we offer you, Mr. Carter, is not a choice, but an opportunity. An opportunity to be part of the greatest leap in human evolution." The alien beside him extended his hand again, the gesture no longer an invitation, but a confirmation. "The new world requires pioneers. You will be the first bridge between our species. You will not be erased. You will be more." The word "more" echoed in Jake's mind, simultaneously alluring and horrifying. He looked past the unyielding Director Fulks to Dr. Arden, searching for any flicker of doubt, any hint of humanity in the scientist's eyes. He found nothing but a quiet, scientific curiosity. Arden wasn't a villain. He was a researcher on the cusp of the greatest discovery in history, and Jake was merely the final data point. "What if I refuse?" Jake asked, his voice quiet but firm. Director Fulks offered a faint smile. "Resistance, Mr. Carter, will merely confirm our assessment of your psychological resilience. The process is not contingent on your conscious consent. The Cradle has chosen you. Your body has already been adapting from the moment you entered its energy field. We are merely here to ensure a smooth transition." The alien stepped forward, its large black eyes seeming to look past Jake's physical form directly into his consciousness. "You fear to lose yourself, but you are not merely flesh and memories. It is a pattern. We will add to your pattern, not erase it. You will experience the universe in ways you could never imagine." Before Jake could react, one of the Guardian drones drifted silently behind him. It didn't touch him, but Jake felt a strange, warm energy encompass him, soothing his tensed muscles and slowing his racing heart. Resistance wasn't just futile, it was physically impossible. He was guided towards one of the empty stasis pods. It opened with a soft hiss, releasing a plume of warm, humid mist. Inside, it wasn't a bed, but a network of soft, bioluminescent biocables that seemed to undulate and shift as if alive. "It won't hurt," Dr. Arden said, his voice almost reassuring. "It will be like sinking into warm water. The pod will stabilize your body while your mind becomes acquainted." As Jake was led to the pod, the alien guide placed its long, multi-jointed hand on his shoulder. It wasn't a touch of flesh against flesh. It was a touch of consciousness against consciousness. Jake's mind exploded with a symphony of knowledge. He experienced the history of a species spanning millions of years, saw the birth and death of stars, felt the cold void between galaxies. He felt their purpose, not conquest, but preservation. They were travelers, archivists, gathering life in a dying universe, preserving it, merging with it so it might endure entropy. His fear began to recede, replaced by a sense of awe so vast it threatened to consume him. He understood that he was not being offered death, but immortality of a different kind. As the biocables reached for him, Jake did not flinch. He looked past the scientists and the military, past the sleeping aliens, and his gaze met that of the being beside him. He was a bridge, and the crossing had begun.